Welcome to the Sourcing Industry Landscape podcast, hosted by Dawn Tura, CEO and President of SIG.
Hello, folks. This is Dawn Tura, and I am so excited to tell you about who I have in the studio today. Now, Karina Swette is probably one of the more intelligent women I've ever met. She knows so much about so many things, so I can't wait to get into some questions. Karina is a partner with Oliver Wyman's Operations and Consumer and Industrial Products practice. She has a specialty in procurement, strategic sourcing, supply chain, operational cost reduction, and due diligence and operational due diligence, some of my favorite subjects. So Karina, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Dawn. It's a pleasure to be here.
So folks, I know you're dying to hear from Karina. Before we get started, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. And when we return, you're going to hear from my guest, Karina Swette.
What is Sig University? We are an inclusive, internationally recognized university whose mission is to advance the procurement profession while enabling students to transform their careers through our world-class certifications. Sig University offers industry-recognized certifications programs, each offering a unique set of competencies and skills that sourcing and risk professionals need to be successful. The programs provide advanced training in subjects like strategic sourcing, supplier management, third-party risk management, intelligent automation, and more. Sig University is committed to academic excellence, which is why our students are trained alongside an international cohort, engage in discussion forums, and learn from senior practitioner faculty who leverage their deep industry experience with real-world case studies. Why Sig University? It was created originally at the request of SIG members. We knew there was a lot of training out there, but nothing designed around the ever-evolving skills and competencies that the modern sourcing and risk professional needs. The program was created through collaborating with dozens of industry experts to create a curriculum that is bold, fresh, and applicable to this day and age. If you're looking to advance your knowledge and your career, join us at SIG University.
So Karina, I am so excited to have you here and a chance to pick your brain a little bit, but I also want people to know that if you're listening to this or watching this, you're going to have a chance to see Karina live at the summit on October 17th, Monday, and she is one of the hosts of the CPO Executive Roundtable. So I know you're going to want to hear more, so make sure that you get registered, make sure you sign up for that event. So Karina, I want to talk a little bit about ESG, sustainability. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, let's jump in.
Good. So, sustainability is in the headlines all the time. And, there's a mixed level of commitment and impact. ESG, suddenly, we didn't say the word or the initials ESG until about 2 years ago. It was always sustainability or CSR, corporate social responsibility. But now, regulators are involved. You're getting pressure from investors to have good ESG scores. Just tell me about how you're seeing this coming about in the world.
Yeah, so, I'm really excited because I've worked on this topic for a long time, and it has had always a lot of headlines, but not a lot of action, right? So I think we're seeing a lot more change in really sort of not only defining strategy, but trailing it through into the operations, right? And specifically letting procurement get involved, right? So there's, it's been a level it's been a strategy that's sat sort of at a different level, and now is sort of, we're getting involved, right? And it excites me because we have the biggest opportunity for change, right? There is so much that procurement can control in shaping ESG. So, but, to your question of, why now or what's different? Because I think that's important, that there are sort of four things that are standing out that I think will make the sustainability, really happen with ESG. The regulation is here, and you're going to be required to do your disclosures, and so it is going to become an important element of a must do, right? You're going to need to know across the elements of both E, S, and G. There's also increasing pressure from investors. And so I think in the past, it's been less forefront of the investor community. And, we're seeing specifically ESG funds. We're seeing, so much movement in that space. And so, where the money goes, people tend to listen. And so I think, it's great that we're seeing that reaction from that community. The third thing is around supply chain. It's through, not that old, but through a part of my career, right? Things have been sort of easy breezy, right? Like there have not been, massive global pandemics. I can't believe we're at war, right? And there's just like things like that are happening that, we've had a breezy 10 years. So I think people realize that sort of stability might be gone for at least the near, medium, maybe long term. And so there's a change in how people are viewing supply chain risk and what they should do around it. And so I've had an increasing growth in, certainly at least questioning the idea of doing more, nearshoring, bringing things in house, right? Integrating the supply chain. So there's a lot of topics that the fortunate part is they play nicely for ESG, right? So we're not shipping things all over the world and getting things from here and sending them here and packaging them here. So we'll see if that ESG can sort of bring that to life, right? And really get benefit from that supply chain component.
Yeah. And so, back in the 2008 period, we had just started talking about going green, and that was pretty much the language. We talked a little bit about carbon. And when 2008 market crisis happened, people threw it out. They threw out the baby, the bathwater, everything, because it was right back to cost savings. There's talk that we could be heading into recession. Do you think the regulations that we have in place now will keep us from being able to throw it out, or do we have such a strong commitment with this generation? What is it that's going to keep it this time?
Exactly. It's a great point, right? And we're seeing slippage in Europe, I think, already happening, right? Because we need to have heat, so winter is coming. So we'll see how well things can hold. And I think there always has to be flexibility, but even through COVID, we haven't seen at least, in a lot of industries, a step back from commitments to hiring women and minorities, right? We haven't seen a step back from people continuing down their carbon path, right? So, there's so many factors across ESG that, we haven't seen slow down through COVID. And so I'm hopeful that they continue, right? And so the change now, right, in my fourth element is social media pressure, right? And so the end consumer cares. People are different. The value system that we hold, I think it was always there, but the way that we intake news and media and engage in news and media with our own opinions and how much it sort of, stand for your values is out there. I think it's becoming increasingly important. And so I do hope, I am very hopeful that it will continue throughout turmoil, right? And that it will stay in the forefront.
Well, you're so right. I mean, I was the same as you, and I pushed, just-in-time delivery, all of those things for cost savings, and bypass the warehouse, go to job site, all those type of things. And so I'm obviously rethinking a lot of that. Like inventory is not a bad word these days, and everything else. But give me your perspective. You guys are worldwide, and I know that you are in charge of North American practice, but you know the European practice really well. Are we behind on our goals? They might have slippage, but are we even close to where they are in achieving or believing in ESG?
Dawn, that's a great question, right? And I think we certainly are being led by our European colleagues, right? In our survey that we put out, 41% of our North America respondents said that their corporate ESG goals have not been translated into qualitative or quantitative objectives, right? So we're not even putting qualitative objectives up there. That compared to only 19% in Europe, right? So one, still pretty staggering percentages, right, that we need to overcome, because if you don't turn it into a trackable goal, we know, right, if we can't measure it, how are we going to assure that we're succeeding and holding ourselves accountable to the progress, right? So 41% to 19 to me is a pretty staggering gap that we have opportunity for growth.
That's incredible. So, you talk about volatility in supply chain, and that's obviously what, a lot of us are dealing with. And, when you talk about, first the pandemic, and then we had, zero COVID in China. And then you followed up with, a cargo ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal. And then you followed up with the war in Ukraine, followed up by electricity, heat wave in China, and all electricity being diverted from manufacturing, followed up by, the dock workers renegotiating a contract, and us almost having a railway strike here in the United States. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so where are we going to get the resiliency in sourcing supply chain to say, look, Black Swan, it's a flock. They're coming. They're going to be migrating in and out all the time now. Get used to it. We're going to have Black Swan events, but you still can build in ESG. You can still build in resiliency. Are you any of your clients like trying to challenge you and say, I can't, there's too much going on?
Oh, of course, right. And I think the key for us is helping get procurement to sit at the table and understand that how some of the ESG components just line up in general with an overarching risk component, right? And so we're seeing a little bit of the focus shift from that cost savings to risk aversion, right? And securing supply. And some of that, it has a nice kind of complementary component with ESG, right? We've seen a lot more ingenuity and, innovation coming out, right? That, alternative supplies. And so, as well as when things are in turmoil, right? People don't like change. So it's hard to push this stuff when everything is great. Why am I going to rock the boat? Now that the boat is rocking, we're like, maybe we should consider it, right? And so I think there's, in the first bit of the pandemic, I certainly thought people would take a step back, but I think everyone's right at the line going, I can leverage this, right? There's innovation that's going to come out of this that's going to make us stronger, and those that aren't moving are going to get left, right? And so I am very hopeful.
So you work with mega corporations. Are they talking about moving a lot more manufacturing onshore or near their production facilities?
I think it wildly depends on the industry, right? But I think there is a strong, what we're seeing change is the thoughtfulness in what a TCO analysis, right? Or total cost of ownership, right? So I think a lot of times other components down the chain were not always part of the equation. And now with, carbon leading the trail, of course, but other elements beyond that, people are starting to do the entire set of math, right? Both from acquisition to disposal, the costs associated with a cross, right? And how it fits into broader corporate goals, right? And where does it become cheaper? Where is it more effective to make a change to meet broader objectives, right? And then there's a lot of opportunity within procurement, right? I mean, you can internally recycle all the paper you want, but it's going to become hard to reach those goals unless you change your operations or your manufacturing lines to be more thoughtful about, where you're getting raw materials, what you're, how you're building things. And so I think there's a lot to come, but it is certainly becoming a larger thought across the decision making.
I love what's going on and all the conversations that people are having. So do you think that, as we talk about procurement, and one of the things that I've been watching is, we know our scope 1, emissions, we can track that. Scope 2, we might be able to get our arms around, but they're saying that at some point we should be able to track even scope 3 emissions. I have a hard time getting my suppliers to tell me who their suppliers are in the first place, because that's sort of their secret sauce. They don't want to give away who it is. We have to have that transparency, or we're never going to get full visibility into our supply chain and scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. I mean, so how procurement people are listening, what advice do you have for them to how to get our suppliers to understand that transparency is the key for our success in ESG?
So one of the great things I think that is already coming out, right, and there's tons of innovative startups popping up in this space, is, why are we asking the suppliers, right? Why are we not leveraging more third parties out there that are validating and verifying and standardizing this information, right? So, we've been through, secular kind of waves of data and how much, information is out there, and everything is, the word digital is thrown out too much now probably, but, so it brings up a great point of, why are we so reliant on suppliers to provide that information, right? So in our survey, we asked folks, where they were getting the information from as they were, tracking different levels across their supply chain. Over half of the suppliers, or half of our respondents, we're still relying on self-assessments and self-reporting from their supply base, right? So there are so many developing startups and really great companies out there that are tracking this. We do a lot of modeling in our firm that, we're really strong in the auto and heavy industrial space to help our clients think through and track and think about, if I change resources and I change where raw materials come from, how to think about that. So I think we've got to challenge ourselves and say, I shouldn't be so reliant on my suppliers. I need to engage them, right, and have them be part of the solution and strategic thinking. But just sending them a form to fill out, like, that's not going to move the needle, right, at all, right? So we've got to be thoughtful about, where we get information in our data, how we hold folks accountable for reporting, but how we're also checking and making sure that that stuff is, strong and valid. And, we have to continue to push or it won't happen either, right? So,
Yeah.
I don't take no for an answer.
Well, I think that's so true. And, and no one company is going to solve these problems on their own. It's going to take our entire supply chain learning to work together in the future. So has Oliver Wyman created any frameworks, any questionnaires, anything tools that we could download that would be helpful?
A framework, we have, right? We've got a framework for everything, but I think we've got a really strong ESG framework that I find to be a little differentiated because a little bit kind of true to our nature. It's really focused on impact and getting into the operations and how do you really get it done, right? So, there's a lot out there in terms of how to set the goals and, it's really important. So if you don't set the goal, you don't start the process, right? But setting that goal is just that first step of, we've got 12 different activities that you can work through. So I know there's a link on here. You guys can go check out the framework. But what I think is really interesting about our framework, right, is it's got sort of 4 key pillars. So you start with this goal, but then where do you go, right? And so we've got track, act, impact, and operate, right? And so it's really important that we start to define what we're going to track, right? We've got to have our goals translated. We've got to have a baseline of which to move from. Right, we've got to act, right? We've got to get that high level goal into the nitty gritty of the business, right? So those category, those strategies need to be done at the category level, right? So how are we turning a procurement view into a tangible, actionable view? And so that, Bob in charge of XYZ category is driving this, right? We've got to really empower our folks and get that goal all the way down.
Yeah, I mean, you start at the top and then cascade it. But if I don't personally know what my contribution needs to be, I won't push it.
And enabling the procurement folks, right? They're going to make so much change for you, right? And they're more likely really passionate about it, right? So give them the opportunity. You should have goals defined at every category, right? And they'll may be different, and the objectives might be different, but every category should have some form of ESG goal around it, right?
Yeah.
We've got a lot of info about, engaging the supply base, partnering. And then, when you move into the impact, right, you've got to champion change internally, but you've also got to accelerate it through your entire external ecosystem, right? So it's like, how do you really leverage all the different parties that can be involved? And then that last kind of key pillar is to operate, right? And it's, how are you tracking, monitoring, and that again circles back to that TCO I talked about earlier, right? It's how you're really getting into it, so it is really, part of the business, and you're fully understanding it across the chain, getting involved in all the procurement processes. You got to get your teams and upskill everyone involved. So there's a lot to do. So check out that framework. But I think what's very cool about it is it really helps you start from this goal to like, how are we going to get it done, right? And so hopefully people have set their goals and now are thinking about how are we going to get this done, right?
And what if a company has set goals, but they haven't told procurement? Like you said, I think 41% don't have it translated. Should I, as a procurement person, say, hey, I want to play in this field, I want to help, and how do you get invited into the ESG conversation if you're not there already?
Don, that's such a great question, right? And, I was staggered by this response, right? And sort of like a little disheartened. But in the survey, we were finding out, right, there are different roles that folks are getting to play in terms of where are we at this seat at the table. Only 15% of the companies had had the procurement team had roles within ESG initiatives, either as at a more senior level involvement, right, where the CPO might be sitting on the this ESG board, or that procurement was being pulled into other ESG initiatives throughout the organization, right? So that to me is startling, right? Where there's so much opportunity, right? There might be a make versus buy decision, right? There might be a switching materials decision, right? And that's happening like in ops, and then we might get a call later where it's like, hey, let us go test the market. Let us go, find out from our supply base what's going on, right? So there's so much opportunity for procurement to really move the needle. So I think it's what you said, right? If we can take ideas and start finding ideas and bringing them to the table, right? We've got to make our voice heard because we have so much opportunity to make a significant impact, right? So this should be on every CPO's agenda. They should be bringing ideas they should be pulling ideas from their team, who therefore should be pulling ideas from the supply base. And they should be bringing those to their CEOs and demanding the CEOs.
Yeah. So folks, we are out of time today, but I have so many questions I want to ask you, Karina. So I know I have access to you. Can people reach out if they want to follow on conversation with you?
I am wildly passionate about this topic. I think it is so important. I would love to chat with anyone who is interested, right? So I think my information's on there. Please go read our study. It's very cool. And I think it's a good foundation for you to, a CPO to take that to their CEO and say, look, we're behind. We're behind, right? And this is going to be really important, right? So I think it's a great opportunity. And so, yeah, I'd love to chat more. Thank you all for listening. And hopefully I'll see some of you at the Sig event.
I'm sure you will. So folks, on October 17th, the CPO Executive Roundtable, Karina is going to be there. It'll give you an opportunity to talk to her face to face. We'll have lots of breaks. You can get your questions in. She's going to be presenting. We can get into more detail. And if not, you can't make it, Karina, can I invite you back for a follow-up to the podcast?
Always happy to chat, Dawn. It's always a pleasure.
Great. Thank you. So folks, make sure you continue to tune into the podcast series. Hopefully we'll see all of you at the upcoming summit.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Sourcing Industry Landscape podcast through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. Want to nominate someone for an interview? Email us at info@sig.org.